Good afternoon. I'm Karen Yetter, Director of Marketing, and on behalf of Mercator Advisory Group, I'd like to thank you for attending our webinar, Simplify E-commerce Payment Processing while Increasing Revenue and Reducing Costs. There'll be a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, you may submit it online by clicking on the questions panel. If we do not get to your questions, please email marketing@bluesnap.com. Our presenters today are Raymond Pucci, Director of Merchant Services at Mercator Advisory Group, and Ralph Dangelmeyer, CEO of BlueSnap. I'll now turn it over to Ray.
Thanks very much, Karen. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So glad you could spend a brief part of your day with us. And we hope to give you some good insight in what's going on currently in the e-commerce world. Again, thank you for joining, and glad to have you here, Ralph, as well.
Thanks, Ray. Great to be here.
Always a pleasure. I was noticing, Ralph, e-commerce sales are off to a flying start this year. Cyber Monday shows record sales, almost $8 billion in sales. That's U.S. e-commerce sales, a 20% increase over last year. And mobile transactions are up over 50%. So that's quite off to a great start. What are you seeing on that?
Well, we hope that we help contribute to that because we love e-commerce. All of our merchants are e-commerce, and we agree. I mean, it's amazing that if you think about it, about 10% of all e-commerce transactions were done in one day this year. And what also is really interesting is we saw that our average client was actually up over 100% year over year on last November to this November. So we're just seeing tremendous growth from our client base moving from card present to card not present. So real exciting times, Ray.
Yeah, that's amazing. And from what we're seeing in Mercator, there are a lot of the tumblers in the right position, so to speak, given, consumer confidence and people's ability to, shop online. And we're going to cover a little bit of that. I'm going to just spend a few minutes going over some of the things that we're seeing in Mercator actually related to mobile and mobile payments and mobile shopping, which, of course, is playing a much larger role now in the e-commerce world. And as we're seeing, I'll just get into some of the market dynamics related to, of course, there's a very high penetration of smartphone ownership. A key thing with the dynamics now, merchants are so much more proficient, and their developers have been able to make omni-channel a real reality with shoppers being able to have much more of a frictionless experience while shopping online, and mobile plays a huge part in that. Mobile apps now are very, very easy to navigate for the most part, and so people really are using that as really a way of shopping life for them on their mobile devices. And it's really generating quite a lot of competition, which is good for the consumer to seek out, the best mobile apps and e-commerce shopping experiences. At Mercator, we follow mobile payments, and I just wanted to show the comparison between remote and proximity mobile payments. And the point of this slide, the remote mobile payments would be e-commerce, and that would be where people are using, say, their mobile browser to shop and purchase, or a mobile order and pay. And you can see how the mobile remote payments will be really taking off 3 to 4 times from about the 100 billion mark where they have been the last year or so. So that's going to be where we're seeing a great growth in remote mobile purchases. And I like to think of it, the new normal is concierge commerce. And that's really what merchants have to look at as the new imperative, that the customers are choosing where, when, and how to shop, which again is another play on mobile devices being with people all the time. On the next slide, one of the dynamics is the competition over the mobile wallet. And this just shows from one of our Mercator primary data surveys, the split among the different types of cards that are being loaded into mobile wallets. And actually, as you see, a debit has shown some increasing importance for people to be loaded into their mobile wallets. And here we're seeing how so many people are using their smartphones to shop. We're showing from one of our recent surveys, 2/3 of smartphone owners are shopping online by mobile, and over half, no big surprise, have shopped in the last month. But this goes to show that the data is supporting what our insight is that we're observing on the e-commerce shopping scene here. And just a brief look at where we're seeing, these are some selected merchant vertical categories that we feel will have among the best growth for mobile payments, mobile shopping, on-demand restaurants, convenience, retail, including gas stations. Travel and events will be playing a really larger role as people are booking travel and entertainment and tickets on their mobile devices. And lastly, we've looked at, we survey businesses, small to medium businesses, and it's been consistent the last few years that we've asked them about dealing with payment acceptance services, and about 3/4 are saying they deal with one provider, and 1/4 deal with multiple. And the point I wanted to make here is kind of a caveat for merchants and businesses that are out there, that as they grow, they can still rely on simply one payment provider. And because even as they expand sales, they want to keep their complexity and overhead costs low by just dealing with one provider. So that would certainly be a message for the merchants to keep in mind as they grow and expand into new markets, especially globally. And lastly, and just as a reminder, Mercator Advisory Group, we follow everything payments, and you can keep up with payments news, content, and commentary on our daily payments journal, our electronic newsletter. And with that, Ralph, I'll turn it over to you, and I'd like to hear about what's going on in your world.
Thanks, Ray. Great information. Could not agree more. I like to use the words global and mobile is the theme that we're hearing with almost every single merchant or business that we see, because I think what also is driving a lot of this demand for e-commerce is not just B2C, which we all think about, but also B2B. And the slide I like to talk about first is just our view of what we see going on in the market, also partnering with Mercator, is that people sort of forget that we're moving into a $10 trillion market for e-commerce. And most of the work, most of the volume is actually coming on the B2B side. Right, so people tend to talk a lot about B2C, and they tend to miss B2B, but B2B is extremely active and a great way to attract new clients. As a matter of fact, a lot of clients that we deal with have both, where they might be selling to the consumers, but also the small business, and it's really B2B and B2C. So if you think of B2B, you think of cross-border, you think of mobile, you see this explosion on e-commerce. And what we're seeing as it relates to you, Ray, and talking about the one provider, is that it's very hard for folks on their current platforms to really move to that one provider. So we've kind of bucketed things in what we call a generation story. And we kind of looked back over 25 years and said, what does e-commerce really look like? And we think there's what we call Generation 1, Generation 2, and Generation 3 as a way we've organized kind of the players in the market and what's going on. And we kind of think that, obviously, 25 years ago, people use this term, and it's probably one of the most misunderstood and overused terms in e-commerce, this thing called gateway. And what does it really mean? But many of the gateways are out there today just provide connectivity, and the merchant is left to basically build their own platform as it relates to system integration and to banking around the world. So it takes a long time, takes them a lot of work to do, and if they want to make updates, it's a big development project. So what happened is Generation 2 came along, where somebody said, geez, why don't we take the APIs, the new technology development, the banking accounts, and all the connectivity, and merge that together. So you get a cooler UI, you get your connectivity, you get your bank account all rolled out. And those were big hits. And I think people know some of the brands that have gone on and done a great job in marketing what we call Generation 2. But we think we're moving into a new generation, especially with all this global mobile, all the new payment types, all the new regulations around payments, is really how does a merchant really get payments as a service from one provider? What do they need to do? And so we said to ourselves, how do we build a product that actually fits into that marketplace? So what we see a lot of is on this next slide is that merchants today have connected to a lot of either Generation 1 or Generation 2 gateways. They've got 4 or 5 for different functionalities or different geolocations. They've had to then retro integrate them into their B2B invoicing or marketplaces or wallets, really struggle a lot with reporting. So when you're on a website and you're having trouble checking out because it's not as slick, or we like to use the word frictionless, you find out that it's extremely difficult for these sites to just move to an Uber or an Amazon experience. So we like to say that when our clients switch over, as the next slide illustrates, they have a real slick checkout process where all the data can be stored, they can use a wallet, they can really check out seamlessly. It's kind of what we call a Gen 3, right down to what you talked about, Ray, with the one provider providing the ability to scale and expand around the globe. So that's how we package the product. And so one of the ways we've actually succeeded in doing that is looking at the way the merchant accepts payments as a service. So we think of it as the way you maybe check out online or order ahead, the way an invoice comes, the way a subscription may run in the SaaS economy, the way things run for marketplaces, that if we look at this as a service that a merchant can call, they can then decide in what country and what product, how they want to get paid, how they want to accept payments. And so that's a real, I think, new way of looking at things, which allows you to scale globally with one provider. And then once that decision is made, the next thing that happens is we kind of say, you walk around the wheel, we say, look, once you've made that decision, you only have to sign one contract, you only have to do one integration, you're only going to get one payout. We'll help route to the bank that we'll put you on based on your domicility and based on where your shoppers are, right? And then we'll route to the highest conversions. We'll allow you to have 100 currencies. We'll allow you to put up to 100 payment types into the checkout flow. Of course, by country, you wouldn't have 100 in one spot. You would do it by IP. I think it's crazy not to put the wallets out for slicker checkout. I mean, that's the fastest way to compete with an Amazon one-click is to have a wallet out there. That's been really popular. I think we've seen our wallets implementations go up over 50% just in the last year. So most of the merchants are putting that out. You need to have a really good fraud and chargeback management system, and then you get it all in a cool report. So when you walk around the wheel from 12 o'clock to 11 o'clock, these are the options the merchant has to actually deploy one solution across the world. So that's a lot different than using a payment gateway today, where you really have to build all these integrations on yourself, or you're compelled to get your own banking relationship. So it's a lot for a merchant to manage as they grow. So we think that you're right, Ray, that the one provider is great, and I think that's a place where a lot of the small businesses have gone. We felt that the greatest place to service that is the middle market, because they also want one provider. The middle market are just larger small businesses. So that's been the approach we've taken at BlueSnap. Another important thing is, especially if you're a middle market business or small business, you're very reliant on your ISV or your integration, whether it's a shopping cart, an accounting system, a marketing tool, a shipping system, all of the above. We've made sure that we've integrated to those platforms, so it's a very seamless integration for the merchant. So, and what we're trying to really do is take the system integration work out of the merchant's hands and let them use more plug-and-play materials as they need to develop their business as it grows, especially as this e-commerce market is kind of booming. So that's a little bit about what we do. BlueSnap, we're here in Boston, but obviously you got offices all around the world. We got thousands of clients. We've won a great number of awards, but we really are proud about how we can provide this sort of one-stop shopping package e-commerce solution for that merchant. So that's a little bit of what we saw, Ray. I know we got a little time left, and I tried to keep it a little brief, but we could either open up to questions, or if you have something else you want to add that I missed, please do.
Sure, and that was an excellent roadmap and process, that you walked us through in, how e-commerce has really evolved, and how merchants can best deal with the package of services that's out there. Certainly, what I wanted just to mention before we get to questions, just about a month ago at the Money 2020 conference, you made an announcement with some partners, and I just thought you could tell us a little bit more about that and how it's been going in the first month of that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did something that I don't think has been done in a long time in e-commerce, but we announced a partnership with Bank of America Merchant Services, where they will be offering BlueSnap solution primarily to its mid-market clients, because obviously the need of having a packaged global solution for them was something that their customers were demanding. And we announced it a little over a month ago, and we have about 30 clients already live and running on the platform successfully that are Bank of America clients. So it's been a great partnership to start, and we think there's going to be a lot more to happen over the next couple of years. And there was another one that we announced just before that, was that the team at First Data and us had worked closely together in the past, and that we also announced that we're sort of a certified gateway partner of First Data, so we can help their merchants and ISVs get boarded to the First Data processing network of banks. So that was another great announcement that we made. So two big ones that happened in the last month, and it's keeping us real busy here, Ray.
Yeah, and I'm sure it is, and certainly two great partners to work with. So that certainly is an excellent triumvirate to look forward to watching. Let's go to some questions that are coming in, and we invite people again on the line to submit questions in the question box that you see on your screens. And let's see. The first question relates to that's asked is, how much does mobile make up of e-commerce transactions? Let me start off with that, Ralph, and then you can follow up here. There are different estimates, and it's a number that's increasing. And my feeling, mobile transactions make up between 50 and 60% of all e-commerce transactions. As we saw when I mentioned some of the market stats from Cyber Monday, mobile transactions increased 55%. So I would say, again, between 50 and 60%, is what mobile makes up of e-commerce, and that would be, for the most part, smartphones, but don't forget tablets as well. And there's also now wearables, but smartphones are the biggest play in that. Any thoughts on that, Ralph?
No, we agree totally, Ray. I mean, we're seeing, I think there was some really good stats earlier that half of the folks are actually shopping online on the phone now, and people are now buying, which is a big deal. It's moved from shopping to buying. And a lot of that is making it really easy for people to buy on the phone, which, again, we're seeing a major push of that for merchants who want to build a better e-commerce store, really shopping experience for their merchant. And a lot of times it stops before the payment. And we're really encouraging people to do the last mile and make that mobile checkout experience slick and easy. And so I think we said about half our merchants that come in are really worried about that, and we're seeing our data is very consistent with the national trends.
Right, and of course, checkout abandonment has always been the bane of e-commerce merchants. So, right, the mobile apps have become so slick and more easy to navigate, and the technology itself, not only the friction-free part of making a purchase, but how fast a transaction can go through now, comparatively speaking, in the last year or two. And a lot of that has to do with the security and fraud detection aspects that you touched upon as well. We have a question that's come in, and it's actually asking to go back to one of your slides, Ralph. So let's see. Can you go back to the slide on the generations and explain the differences, especially between Generation 2 and Generation 3? Ralph?
Sure. Yeah, so I think a couple things going on. I see Generation 2 as obviously being that slick API, onboarding, bank account, but what we've seen on almost all Generation 2 businesses out there is that they're very regional focused, and they're really not dealing well with cross-border. So they don't allow you to do multi-currencies. They don't allow you to be able to accept payments in one currency and get paid out in another currency. They don't really have the ability for you to board and then automatically board to other countries. You have to do more merchant application. You have to do more data. You have to do sometimes more connectivity. We've seen that in a lot of cases the fraud rules haven't been really tweaked to deal with people in other countries. They don't have a lot of alternative payment types. So if a card declines, they can't come along and say, hey, have you tried using one of these alternative payments? So it's really not really designed in a way where somebody can plug and play different components of their product. It may not be designed to deal with the IP issues and language issues per country. So we think we're in a big shift here to be able to help people. And I think another thing with Generation 2 is it's generally not omni-channel as well, as you brought up earlier. So those are some of the limiting factors. I think we're moving into this big Gen 3 area because of the volume, because of what clients want, and we're just personally seeing many people, dozens a day, convert off of Gen 2 for these kind of reasons. So that's our own view of the world.
Great. Thanks, Ralph, for expanding on that thought. We have time for a few more questions as they're coming in. And again, if anyone wants to submit, we'll try to work you in. And by the way, if we do not get to any questions as we approach the top of the hour, we will definitely follow up with any questions that come in. We'll follow up on any that we are not able to answer. Speaking on fraud, as we've been mentioning, Ralph, a few thoughts on fraud. A question is, does e-commerce fraud increase during the holiday shopping season? I have a few thoughts, but go ahead. Do you want to say what you think about that and whether fraud increases?
So what we've seen here is fraud attempts, I should say, are actually fraud is not increasing because we partner with a third party called Count, the K, and we allow the merchant to set up their own rules for if they want for all of their accounts. So we've got fraud pretty well under control. However, the attempts of fraud have been increasing almost 100%. We've seen things like account takeover going there. We've seen people rushing orders out the door and say, I got to hurry up and sell this product because I got to ship it for Christmas, which generally is fraud. And we've seen a lot of attempts at fraud. So I would generally say that when things are sort of busy, that's when the criminals are out trying to capitalize on your busyness or confusion to make hay. And so I would say it is on the increase. I haven't seen the numbers for November yet, but I would say based on volume going up and the amount of attempts we've seen recently, that it is on the rise.
Right. I would echo that, Ralph, and I think the key distinction that you point out is attempts. I did see the other day, and of course we talk with the security and risk management firms as you do, and they're talking about how the fraudsters are using, bots, these automated robots that can really make an assault of millions of attempts, and there can be, they try to overwhelm systems, but fortunately, as you mentioned, companies like Count have very advanced machine learning algorithms that really pick up on that. But I mean, it's a battle. The fraudsters are pretty smart, like everyone else. You can't underestimate them, and they look for vulnerabilities, as you indicate, Ralph, when it's really busy or late in the day, or take even Christmas Eve. They'll try to make a big assault as merchants are looking for those last e-commerce sales to come in. So, but merchants always have to be on the lookout, and it is a big battle, certainly. But fortunately, there's some great tools out there, and as you mentioned, Ralph, that you're utilizing. And a question came in. Let's see. We mentioned B2B e-commerce, and it's forecast to be larger than B2C. Does your solution address that, and where are the mobile rates for B2B growing? Ralph?
Yeah. So we do address B2B and B2C, we think real well, because we've got great ability for people to accept payments off of invoicing. We've got direct integrations like American Express to sell a lot of B2B, and we think we have good support for B2B. So we've had a huge increase in our B2B client base. What we are seeing is a lot of people are starting to pay on mobile in B2B. And it's just interesting to see that trend pick up a little bit. I was a little surprised at that because you figure you have to go through the accounting approvals. But what's happened is we've seen things like if the bill is under $5,000, a lot of businesses will let their people pay for it on a credit card and or some kind of P card. And so we're seeing those just get, faster approval and turnaround time for invoicing. So, and as a matter of fact, we've even got some clients that are now sort of demanding that if an invoice is under a certain dollar amount, it does get paid by a credit card, either up front or immediately afterwards. And that just helps them improve their receivables and collections business tremendously. So that's a big trend that we're seeing. And I think the other thing we're seeing too, if you want to call it B2B, is we're working with a lot of charitable organizations and tuition type colleges and universities, and we're seeing them send even big tuition bills and maybe donations of size to consumers with sort of an invoice or receipt that they need, obviously, because it might be tax deductible, they might need it for their files. And we're seeing within the card scheme rules, obviously, the ability for those businesses or universities to charge what you would call a processing fee of some kind. And as long as it's stated and it's clear, that's becoming pretty popular way. So effectively, the merchant is now passing the fee right back onto the business, and the business can decide how they want to make the payment. So lots of innovation, lots going on in that space. I think it's growing wildly, and we're there to support the businesses on that.
Right, and we're certainly agreeing and seeing that the B2B in the e-commerce area is definitely, the huge addressable market that's out there that's really going to be on the increase. Okay, that's about it for the questions that we have. Thank you again. We'll handle any as a follow-up. And again, this has been Ray Pucci at Mercator Advisory Group and Ralph Dangelmeyer at BlueSnap. Thank you very much, Ralph, for joining us today.
You're welcome, Ray. Thanks a lot for the insight. Enjoyed working with you on this project.
Exactly, and I'll turn it back to our host, Karen.
Thank you for participating in today's webinar. If you have any questions or would like additional information, please email marketing@bluesnap.com. Thank you, and this now ends our webinar.
Thanks, Karen.